Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 170 of the I Rock Knits podcast. My name is Cori Eichelberger, and I go by I Rock Knits everywhere on the internet. And I'm so glad you're here today because I have a special guest. This is my friend Sandi Rosner, and she's coming to us from the North Carolina area. And I'm so excited to be chatting with her today because she is a woman of many jobs. And we have found that to be kind of the truth around some of these knitwear designers and knitting teachers. And you are a tech editor, and you're going to tell us all about different things that you do in the industry. And so, yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
I should also mention that you have an amazing blog. So we are going to talk about that too, because that is kind of how I recently found out that you are a writer and you enjoy writing. And so I follow your blog, and then I said, hey, do you want to come on the podcast and talk about a few of these things? So I'm glad you're here.
I can't believe it's episode 170. Congratulations. That's fabulous.
I know. It's been 6 years. And it'll be, I'm coming up on a year now where I started. Oh, it's just been over a year where I started chatting with friends because I got so tired of listening to myself just chat and go on, which I can do. But I just needed some new content and some new information for people, getting to know some people in the industry. So yeah, I'm really thankful that people have been willing. Why don't you start by telling us where you're at and where you're from, and maybe how you learned to knit?
I live just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. So officially I'm over the state line in South Carolina, but I still think of it as Charlotte because that's a mile away. I learned to knit when I was 17 from the instructions in the back of a magazine. And this was back in the late 1970s, before YouTube, before everybody had a computer in their pocket.
Yep. I think we're about the same age.
Yeah. And when you would go to the grocery store, there'd be all these magazines in the checkout aisle. And there were special interest publications like Women's Day and Family Circle and Good Housekeeping. And they would periodically publish these craft issues. And they would have all sorts of different crafts with full instructions. And in one of those magazines, there was a pattern for a little sleeveless V-neck vest done in stripes of brown. I'm sure it was, different kinds of synthetic yarns, and there was like some mohairy things and some other things. And I thought, I'm going to make that. So I went into a store and I bought exactly the yarn it called for, probably the last time in my life I ever did that, and made the vest from, the diagrams and the how to knit instructions in the back of the magazine. And that
Do you still have it?
Oh no, I'm sure it's sitting in a landfill somewhere.
Sometimes people still have that first disastrous or successful piece, depending. Did it turn out like, did it fit?
Oh, I wore it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be funny to look at it now because I'm sure I would look at it now and say, you've got to be kidding me. But I am the world's worst archivist. I don't keep old things that are no longer useful. And I find that for people like me, I have moved once every 5 to 10 years, my entire adult life.
Yeah.
And when you move a lot, you don't accumulate because you look at everything and say, am I willing to pay to move this?
Right. Yeah. No, I have a friend that's moving right now again, and she just moved maybe 3 years ago. And she said she can't believe how much more she's getting rid of again. Like she said, I'm just purging. I'm not keeping things. And then she offered me an orange bowl because I love orange. And she found this orange bowl and she said, I shouldn't offer this to you because you probably don't need it at your house. But if you want it, it's yours. And I said, of course I want it. It's an orange bowl. It's coming from you, but I'm not moving. So you can bring it over.
You still have nooks and crannies to pack.
I have moved several times, and I do think that gives you a sense of you've got a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
for sure. So had you been a sewer, a craft person, an embroiderer, anything like that before the knitting?
Yes and yes and yes and yes. My mother was a crocheter, so I learned to crochet as a small child.
Okay.
And learned to sew, from sewing doll clothes to Mom made most of our clothes when we were growing up. So there was sewing machine there.
Yeah.
And she taught me to do needlepoint and embroidery and cross stitch and all that sort of thing. But she was not a knitter.
Okay. I back in the day, I remember kind of that era where we were making a lot of things. I remember sewing my first pair of hip huggers,
Ooh.
right? That was a big deal, a big deal. So, so tell me a little bit about growing up in your schooling or what you did in your early career and how what brought you to where you're at today.
It was pretty roundabout. I don't think anybody grows up and says, "Hey, I think I'll be a freelance knitwear designer," or
Yep.
maybe they do now and go to fashion school and things like that. But that's
Oh,
certainly
yeah, maybe. But I still don't think a lot of knitwear designers that we see on Ravelry are have gone to school for it. I mean, a couple, I guess I really only know of like Caitlin Hunter, who actually went to, I think, school for it.
there are others that I'm aware of. People like Fiona Ellis. She actually went to school for it.
Yes.
Um, and there are a couple of others that I'm aware of, but
I think there's a few from the English side that have
yeah,
done that. Yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking more American, but yeah.
But no, I worked in insurance and financial services until I was 40.
Okay. There we
So I
go.
did commercial insurance and risk management. Um,
Okay.
and then got to a point where I wanted to do something tangible. I was working as the risk manager for a large financial services company, and there were all of these big numbers, and it felt like monopoly money, and nothing really felt real.
Yeah.
And so I left and opened a knitting store, and had a yarn store for 7 years, in Sebastopol, California, called Knitting Workshop. And then closed the store when I realized that retail was really not my jam. I was in danger of becoming the cranky yarn store lady that everybody talks about. And so then I started freelancing, designing, tech editing, anything anybody would pay me to do. And then I spent some time as the creative director at Premier Yarns. And that's what caused my move from California to North Carolina because they're based just outside Charlotte. And then left there and went back to freelancing. And then I spent a year and a half as the tech editor at Interweave Knits until they closed the magazine.
Yep.
And then when they closed the magazine, they came and they said, "Hey, we're doing these events and we need help with that. And would you do that on a part-time contract basis?" So that's how you and I met.
Yep.
It's funny because we only met less than a year ago. It was August when we met for the first time at
First
your festival.
in person. Yeah.
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 But I feel like I've known you forever simply because I've seen your name around so much.
Well, I've been doing the hustle for 10 years, and designing for a little bit longer than that, but really doing it kind of full time. When you closed the yarn store, because we did talk about that a little bit the other day, did you sell it or you just shut it down?
When I opened the yarn store, the space next to me and it was a little town of 7,000 people. I was right on Main Street in a commercial building, and the space next to me in the building was vacant. Then about 6 months later, a young couple came in and put in a little French bistro. Was fabulous. The Michelin Guide came through and did a Northern California Michelin Guide, and they got a Michelin star. And all of a sudden, their business blew up right about the time when I was thinking, I do not want to sit in this store all day. And they came to me and said, "How much would it take for you to go away so we can expand into your space?" And the timing was perfect. So I named a number and they wrote me a check, and I did a going out of business sale and sold every ball of yarn, every pattern, all the fixtures, sold it to whoever walked into the door.
Yeah. And then did you move right away then when you started working for Premier?
No, I freelanced for about 5 years while
Oh,
I was
okay.
still in California.
Okay.
So, and that's when I did my first books and started tech editing for various yarn companies. So,
Do you want to talk about the books?
sure. Although they are all at this point out of print, you can, well,
Yeah.
no, the first three are out of print. The last one is still widely available. But I was Unicorn Yarn and Crafts, who at that time was importing the Lana Grossa
Was
yarn, also
yep.
the craft book distributor at the time. They were bringing in the Mylan White self-striping sock yarns. And this was when self-striping sock yarn was an exciting new thing, right?
Yep. I remember.
And since they were importing it, they were afraid that it would get to the point where everybody had enough socks and it would stop selling. So they wanted to come up with projects that were other than socks. So I ended up doing 3 books with them, one a year. The first one was called Not Just Socks, and then there was Not Just More Socks, and then there was Not Just Socks for Kids. All the different things you could do with self-striping sock yarn that preserved the stripe patterning outside of the sock yarn form.
Yeah. And then what's the one that's still available?
That was actually a crochet book, and that was published in 2014. It's called, I'll go grab it. I don't remember.
Good. Yeah, we love to see it.
Silly me. 21 Crochet Tanks and Tunics.
Oh, fun. Look at that little ruffle on that one.
So all sleeveless, warm weather garments in very basic crochet stitches, nothing that required charting. That's how basic the stitches are. But fully graded garments that a grown-up would actually wear out in the world.
Yeah, but 21, that's a big undertaking.
It was challenging. It was like, how do I do 21 sleeveless summer garments?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I've written 2, but I did 8 in each one. So that wasn't as big a undertaking as 21. I can't imagine doing that many more. So what is the definition or the description of a creative director?
Oh, I thought of it as being the voice of the knitter or crocheter within this big yarn company because they were about working with craft stores. So Joanne and Michael's and Hobby Lobby and all of those. AC Moore back when there was AC Moore.
Okay.
And so I would work with the mill on yarn design, choosing from what the mill had, working with them on changing composition or style. I would select color palettes, name the colors. I worked with the graphic designer to do all the labeling. I would work with the salespeople to put together presentations about the yarn. I either designed or directed the design of all the patterns that we put out in support of the yarn, directed the photo shoots, which was great fun. Loved doing photo shoots. So
yeah, so you got to work closely with photographers and models and all that. So yeah. I know that most yarn companies do have creative directors, but I'm not sure that I have not interviewed someone. And so I thought that's going to be something that people aren't going to know necessarily, that term, what that means for someone, because it reads like editor, but it's certainly not the editor of that particular. And then you went to Interweave and you were their tech editor, which is the one another thing we talked about previously this week when we were talking about tech editing, and you were talking about grading and sizing, which can be the bane of most designers' existence, and especially now where we're talking about size inclusivity and we're looking at 12 to 14 sizes for different garments, and those numbers can be really, really challenging.
That has changed so much. I mean, I started tech editing back in 2004, 2005, just because friends would say, hey, I need somebody to look at this pattern. Would you please?
Yeah.
And that's how I learned to do it. And then all of my tech editing work has always come through word of mouth. Somebody would ask, somebody would tell. And so I'm really a self-taught tech editor. There wasn't the sort of programs available for training in that at the time that there is now.
Yeah.
But the standard back in those days was, you'd go to maybe a 44, 48-inch bust, and that was considered a wide size range.
Yeah.
Now, if you've not got at least 9 sizes, you're going to get dinged.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You definitely are. So, and you were with Interweave as only a tech editor or were you doing other things for them too?
My title with them was technical content editor. So if you are signed up for the Interweave newsletter, I would do a lot of technical articles for them, how to do an Italian cast on. I did so
Yep.
many how to do this and how to do that. And so I'd write it and I'd do the photos for the tutorials and all of that. And then I tech edited all the patterns that were in the magazine, wrote some articles.
Yeah. Yeah. And was Interweave in Colorado at the time?
Yes. Yes, but our entire team was spread out all over the place.
Okay.
So even at that point, they were willing to have people work remote. I went to work with them shortly after people were coming back after the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I think that that had really made the transition to remote work.
Yeah. And so just for viewers that know me, know that I have been teaching for Interweave Yarn Fest, which are now Makers Fest, which can also have sewing and beading attached to the knitting side of the events. But it's kind of like I relate it to people in my geographic location to kind of like stitches. Like you go to an event at a big conference center and there are tons of classes and there's a vendor market. And
Yes.
since Stitches is gone, I just say that it's that's what it's like. And so they have events around the country that teachers like me can go to and teach. And the upcoming one that I'm doing is going to be Interweave at Home. We're doing it on Zoom, and that's coming up in about 2 weeks here. So we're both really
Weeks from
busy with
tomorrow.
getting stuff ready and making sure that everything's on board and that kind of thing. And then I'll be going to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where I went last year. That will be in the very end of July, beginning of August. So it's at July 31st, August 1st, 2nd, 3rd. So I'll be teaching again at that one. And then they've had them also in Milwaukee, right?
We're going to Milwaukee this year in October, but that's just bead and jewelry. There's no yarn and
Oh,
fiber
okay.
at that one this year.
Okay. Okay.
Now, in April next year, we used to have Yarn Fest in Loveland, Colorado in
Yep.
April every year. The rates at that venue in Loveland have gotten exorbitant. So we're actually moving it next year, and it's going to be in April in Estes Park. So up in the mountains, there will probably still be snow on the ground. It should be really beautiful.
Yeah.
I know
Nice. Really
snow on the
nice.
ground isn't as exciting for you as it is for me, but
No, that's true. So Estes Park has a big conference center, or it will be in a smaller venue?
they have an event center, which is where they hold the Estes Park Wool Market in, I think, June or July every
Yeah,
year.
June. Yeah.
So it's going to be at that venue. There is not a hotel attached to it. Our host hotel is going to be at the Holiday Inn, it's not tacky Holiday Inn, it's a nice Holiday Inn. It's about 2 blocks away.
Oh, okay.
And we'll run shuttles back and forth.
Oh, okay. I get it. Okay. And then was there one of Yarn Fest? Did they have one in like New Mexico or something?
There was a couple of years ago.
Okay.
It was in a warm time of year, and it did not have the sort of response that the company had hoped for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I'm just saying that because I think it's nice to have a look at how the different places that they've gone and where they have these. And I was fascinated by the stuff that people bring in for the beading and the jewelry classes and the sewing. And when like for knitting, we bring in our knitwear, but knitting and our samples and stuff. But these people bring in machines and flame and and metal and glass and beads. And I mean, it was just, you'd go up the elevator with these instructors and they'd have all, it's very, really, really incredible what they're teaching. And I had a friend that came for the knitting to Lancaster, and then they ended up taking a jewelry class and they made some type of amazing bracelet. And it was like, I think they even soldered. Yeah. And they were really impressed with taking classes in both, at one venue for both activities. So you could really spread it out and do. So are they doing jewelry or beading at Lancaster?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. And there are a couple of instructors who basically transport their entire metalworking studio to the conference center. So there's drills, and there's one instructor who does a lot of torch firing. So like I have to order flammable gases for her, and it's a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's going on. That's the one that is in, and that the venue there is lovely. I loved being at that venue. It's really a nice, you just come downstairs and walk, I don't know, down the elevator to the center, and then the that food market that is kitty corner across the street down the hill is amazing. Like, I don't even know, are there like 16 little booths for food in that? I mean, it's, yeah,
More
it's
than
just,
that, I think it's just lovely. And even
yeah.
the restaurant in the hotel is terrific.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
a great bar. And I
Yeah.
love going to Lancaster. It's a lovely little town.
Yeah, no, really, really nice. And the surrounding countryside just coming over is really lovely. Okay,
Unless you
let's
get
talk a
stuck
little
behind a
bit
buggy.
about let's talk a little bit about your blog, and then we'll talk about some of your designs.
Okay.
So tell us how
I
your
got
blog started.
I started it shortly after Interweave closed the magazine because I had gotten so used to writing on a regular basis for the digital articles and all of that. I thought, well, maybe it's time. And I thought about Substack, which is a platform that allows you to own your own mailing list, you own your own content. And so instead of just kind of putting it out on a blog and hoping people will find it, you actually collect people's addresses and they sign up for the mailing list. And with mine, I publish once a week. I publish every Thursday morning. And I love that I can write about whatever is of interest to me at the time. It's usually something about knitting, something about whatever book I'm reading, and then there'll be links at the end about interesting things that I've seen or that have caught my eye. But I like the freedom of it. I am not a social media person um, for a lot of reasons. I don't like what social media is doing to our attention span and our feeling of adequacy in the world.
Yeah.
But I like it. I'm more of a long read kind of girl. I
Yeah.
do much better when I can write 1,000 words and publish that instead of how do I squish this into this little thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I've been following your blog now for several months, and I have really enjoyed the book reviews have been great. You yarn reviews as well. And
yeah,
then you talk about projects that you have knit or are currently knitting. And then I love the little thing at the bottom. I've done that on my newsletter for a while where I used to always on my podcast share a recipe because I love to cook. And I make like homemade foods. Like, just, I'm not a fancy cook, fancy chef, but I make things, sometimes I use stuff from a can, right? Like in my recipes, but I used to always share these recipes, and the podcast was just getting longer and longer. The more books I read, I wanted to share, the more things I watched. So I cut doing the recipes. So I almost always share a recipe at the bottom of the newsletter, and I'll share, my favorite book that I just read that month or whatever. And I love that part about people don't always scroll all the way down to the bottom of a newsletter, right? But
yeah.
there are other designers that do that too. Like, they share something that they just read or an article or a new pattern or that's coming out, and you got to scroll all the way down, folks.
There's little gems down there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely little gems. So people can go to where to sign up for your newsletter blog.
It is Sandi Rosner, which is all one word run together, and the Sandy is with an I, .substack.com.
Okay, I'll put it down here. So
Thank you.
yeah, so that way people can find you, and you're not you're not hawking your wares over there. You're not really selling anything to anybody or anything like that. But it is just a really nice thing. It comes up. Okay, so then let's talk about a few of your favorite designs. You sent me some beautiful links to some great patterns that you have written, and I had not seen but one of them before. So I was really tickled to look at these and see the different things that you've designed, because I didn't go out and look at them when I met you or got to know you. I'm not even sure I knew that you did design until probably in the last few months. So yeah, let's talk about a few of your favorite designs.
It's funny. It was fun to go through and choose them because at this point I've gotten well over 400 designs up on Ravelry.
Yeah.
And as I'm scrolling back, it's like, oh, I remember that one. I remember that one.
Yeah. So you're very prolific.
Well, I've been doing it a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. But
So,
that's still a lot of patterns.
shall we start with this girl?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is Peloponnese. She's a tidy little cardigan with 3/4 sleeves. And what's fun about her is she's knit from the bottom up in the round. The yoke is done in a slip stitch pattern on a stockinette stitch base. And then the edgings are the same slip stitch pattern, but in garter stitch. So you get that kind of repeat of the trim all the way around. There's a little bit of waist shaping. She's just a really pretty little cardigan.
Yeah, it's really pretty. It's stunning in the black and red. I'll have a picture in so people can see it up closer, but it's stunning in the black and red. It's really pretty. And a number of people would know, but a slip stitch pattern looks like color work, but you are only using one color per row. So although this looks like a very geometric design that might be difficult to knit, it is slip stitch. So you're only working either with the red or the black in the pattern.
Yeah, also known as mosaic knitting. So
yeah, really, really pretty.
and that one was it's DK weight yarn. It was done in Miss Babs, Northumberland. So the black is a fairly solid black, but the red has a lot of variation in the red, which I think keeps it a little exciting.
Yeah, you can see it in the pictures that I printed. It's really pretty. This is the one that I have seen before, the Millefiori. That is one. I am a huge fan of graphic yoked sweaters, but yeah.
Thank you.
This is really, really pretty.
This is also in DK weight. It was done with Campfiber Yarns Strong 75. And it's just 3 colors, which is cool. But I like the contrast. I like that it's simple. Um, it's just the circles repeated, and then there's a little band of them around the cuff of the sleeve. The woman who modeled this in the photo you've got, she wants this sweater. I dug it out of my bin, and now I'm going to put it aside so that the next time I see her, I can give it to her because she loves it.
Is that a fairly new one?
No, 5 years.
2020. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the world of patterns, that's fairly new.
Yeah.
I mean, their shelf life is not super long, but they're always there, right? Like that's what I always say. Like my older patterns are still there. Their shelf life is about this long for publication and when they're going to maybe make it hot or whatever, but they're there forever. So these are all still
there are
available.
some that have a really long tail. One of the photos I sent you is of the lace sampler scarf.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that's a piece I originally designed more than 20 years ago when I had the yarn store.
Because it's beautiful.
Thank you. It was the curriculum for a class I was teaching called Introduction to Knitting Lace. So it's 4 different lace patterns. You start at the ends, it's in 2 pieces, go to the middle and then graft it together in the middle so it's symmetrical. And the first lace pattern creates a scallop on the end.
Yeah.
By doing it from the 2 ends in, you get the same scallop on both sides, which is fun.
Yeah.
And each pattern is both written out row by row and shown to you in charts, and the chart and the instructions sit side by side. So if you're used to working with charts, you can refer back and forth. So, and that has been over the years, my best-selling pattern.
Yep. Yeah. And probably one of the easier ones to design and publish because you didn't have to grade it.
Only one size.
To 12 sizes, right? And so mine too. Mine is the sampler stitch pattern, textured stitches in a cowl. I sold one yesterday. I was like, this was one of my easiest designs ever. Called Knitting at the Library Cowl. When you turn it sideways, it looks like books on the shelf. And it was a sampler I wrote for advanced beginners to learn some stitches. And we took pictures in the library by stacks of shelves. And there are so many people that knit at libraries, so many knitting groups, or they learn at a library or whatever. And that pattern just, I couldn't even believe it. And it literally is probably one of the easiest patterns I wrote as far as like time wise, This is stunning. I think I need to make this because I really think it's pretty.
Thank you. Well,
are the stitch patterns advanced, would you say, or are they intermediate patterns for?
They grow in complexity. It was a 4-week class, and so it's one pattern every week.
Got it.
And they grow in complexity. So I think by the time you get to the last one, it's a stitch pattern where the stitch count changes from row to row.
Oh, okay.
But they're all fairly simple lace stitch patterns.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the picture is stunning the way it's laying, and I'll have it in, but it's really, really pretty.
Well, let's do the other. You need to teach that at your local yarn store. I'm happy to let you use the pattern. So
okay. Oh, that's a good idea. Because I just had a lady ask me the other day if I would teach some project-based classes for her. She lives across the city, but it's only like 45-minute drive. I said, yeah, I would drive over. And so I said, let's decide what we want to teach for that. Let's do the other lace pattern you sent, the red one, this one.
Cramoisie. I actually had to look up how to pronounce it. It's French for crimson. That's one that I did for Vogue Knitting for holiday 2019. And I really loved that sweater. And what's fun about that is that if you look at the finished projects on Ravelry, people are just really happy with it. They like wearing it. And it's fairly simple. It's knit it's a 3/4 sleeve with a dolman sleeve. So it starts at one cuff, goes all the way across to the other cuff, has a big wide band of lace across the shoulders and another wide band of lace around the hips. And that was done in a sport weight yarn that was 100% yak. So it's just delicious.
Super drapey, really pretty. And I can really tell that it's holiday. I mean, with that red and she's got the skirt on, it's just really stunning.
Well, you can't beat Vogue when it comes to styling a photo.
That's true. Very, very true. Did you do a lot of designing for them?
Not really. I mean, I liked Vogue. I always liked looking at Vogue. They don't pay very well.
No. Well, a lot of the magazines couldn't, right? I say that too. I love my local yarn stores, but they can't afford to pay me well, right? And I love going there and teaching, but I have to give up at least a day of the whole day of my life. And then usually there's prep time. And so, you're just not going to make the money that you might need to, kind of support yourself. And so, no, I do think that's kind of the reason that some of the magazines are going by the wayside. It's because the pattern turnaround times, and the payment schedule just wasn't going to meet what some of the designers could do. And then they're not making enough money to pay the designers more,
And I mean, for a designer, I could always make more working with the yarn company than I could working with magazines. So you get to the point, when you're just starting out, God, it's great. You have one in Vogue Knitting and you're in the magazine, and that's always a point of pride. And if you're just starting out and you're looking for the exposure, that's a great one to have on your resume.
Yeah.
But you get to the point where exposure doesn't pay the rent.
Yep. No, exactly. Couple left. Let's do the Fair Winds sweater.
Fair Winds. That was one I did with Northumbria Fibers. And it was in their Spring Street, which is a fingering weight Falkland Islands wool.
Oh, nice.
That sweater turned out to be so distinctly feminine. The sample was done in white with that little blue and lavender yoke and echoed around the cuff. But what I really loved about that, and a touch that I like a lot on circular yoke sweaters, is to do a folded picot hem at the neckline instead of a standard ribbing. I think
it's the first thing I noticed.
makes it feminine.
Yeah, really pretty. But it's nice on the wrist too.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's really pretty. And a fairly simple design. Like there are people that don't like a yoke sweater if they're broad shouldered because they don't
Yes.
like that. And so I always talk to my classes about kind of a necklace yoke, things that don't go out over the shoulder. They stop a little shy of the shoulder because they're more up here, so they're closer to your neck, and they don't necessarily make you feel maybe quite as broad because it stops a little. I just happen to have this on today, but this
Hmm.
one kind of stops a little bit, doesn't go down so deep. That's
Right.
it, yeah, and I think that makes it a little feminine too, right? Because it's a smaller detail. That's
It
really
looks
pretty.
refined.
And then this woman, is she a model that they hired, I assume?
I think she was a neighbor. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because there's a rock wall in the back of this picture, and I have a rock wall in my backyard because when we moved in here, I have an acre of sod out there. And I said to my husband, I know I can't have sheep in the city, but I can pretend like there were sheep here at some time. So they had to grade the backyard anyway. So they found a bunch of boulders, and I have a rock wall in my backyard, pretending like that there were sheep here one day. So the
Well,
rock wall,
Northumbria Fibers is out on Block Island, Rhode Island. So that's
yeah.
where it was photographed.
Yeah. But that makes sense, right? That they would have that
Mhm.
that cheap rock wall like in Ireland, that I think of the all the crofts
Yes.
having those rock walls that they took literally from the fields and stacked them up. And so my husband's like, you're ridiculous. But we put some raspberry bushes out there now, and it fits in the city, even though there are no sheep grazing. Okay, and then let's talk about archipelago.
Oh, Archipelago is one that I did for Webs with their Valley Yarns yarn.
Oh, okay.
And what I love about that one is that it's exceptionally simple. It is just stockinette stitch with lace weight mohair from one end to the other. And then every now and then you hold the lace weight mohair together with a sock yarn to make this little block of color.
Oh, nice.
And so it's just these
I totally see
isolated
it now,
places.
but in the picture, I didn't get it until, oh, that's really clever, Sandy.
So the mohair is sheer, which you also don't get in the picture, but it's got that transparency because it's the lace weight silk mohair on a size 7 needle. So it's transparent, and then this block of color comes in, and then another block of color comes in. And
And that marls the mohair with the color. So then are you wrapping an intarsia twist on the edges, or do you just drop and
no,
pick
I
it up when
just
you come
drop it
back?
and then keep going and come back and pick it up again
Pick it
and go
up.
back because there's not going to be a hole because that
No.
mohair is going throughout. So you don't need to
Oh,
do any twisty, funny things.
that is so awesome. I love that.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I teach a couple of classes that people know, but I teach a class called 50 Shades of Sweaters, and I teach a class called 50 Shades of Shawls, where I haul in 50 to 60 sweaters or shawls and share just different construction methods, different, shapes, different, and then people can try them on and see what they like to style and whatever. But this is brilliant for a class like that where it's just something really different that I have not seen before.
And
That
it's
is
it's
awesome.
so
I love
simple.
that.
Anybody can do it. It does not take special skills.
What yarn did you use for that? Valley? I know it's
Valley
Valley
Yarns,
yarns, but
Huntington, and
in
Southampton.
Southampton. Okay, so a mohair and a fingering.
It was sock yarn, fingering weight sock yarn.
I'm sorry, I'm just astounded. Like I shouldn't be but it's like, it's brilliant, yet it's so obvious, right? You're marling, and yeah, boy, I love that. I really love that.
I love things that are beautiful but simple. I get very frustrated with designers who think they always have to invent something new. And they end up taking the most roundabout ways of getting to something that could be much more easily constructed.
Yes, yes.
I call it knitting gymnastics. Just because you can do it this way doesn't mean that's the best way to do it. So
Absolutely. That's actually really funny. Very, very true. I've seen that. Actually, I'm reading a pattern right now, and I have never seen a designer write asterisk knit one, comma, repeat from asterisk to end of row in this long sentence instead of just saying
knit.
knit. Like just it's it's just knit this row, knit. And it's got this long thing. And I'm like, it stopped me for a second. I was like, what do they want me to do? Knit one and knit one and knit one. And I had never seen it written in a long sentence when you could literally put like K period or the word knit, you know, and it probably is stylistically this person's way of doing it, but I had never seen anything like that before, where it was such a long instruction for such a simple task. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to put knitting gymnastics behind that sentence on that one because I was like, wow, that
Or yeah, I'm a big fan of a well-placed seam. I think seams are good. I think it's an essential knitting skill to be able to make good seams. And there are so many designers who go to such great lengths. The whole set-in sleeve from the top down, where you do the back and the short rows, and then this and short rows, and that just knit it in pieces and sew it together, and you'll have a sweater that fits better for longer.
that's very true. That people became very knitters, some knitters, not all, became very lazy with top-down raglans, right?
Mhm.
And I like a top down raglan. It's easy. But once the top down raglan came, it was like, oh, well, we never have to seam again. And I never want to do a bottom up. And I never want to seam. And I never want to purl. And I never it's just like you took away all these skills that make the sweater usually often a better sweater, right? It
Yes,
made it a better garment. And yeah, but there's a whole generation
yes.
literally of people who don't know how to seam, don't know how to knit from the bottom up, are always talking about trying it on and, figuring out all those things. And yeah, it is surprising to
And
me.
there is nothing wrong with a good seamless top-down sweater.
Right.
But if you aren't careful with them, you end up with things that only fit you for the first hour you're wearing them. And then the sleeves are too long and they start to droop because you've used like a superwash yarn that wants to be very drapey and it sags and bags out of shape because you don't have seams to provide the structure for the sweater. So,
Yeah, and as the sizes get bigger, we end up with these longer and longer yoke depths to
yes,
reach the bust circumference. And I'm just like, oh, no, it doesn't have to break down at your waist.
yes.
Just, yeah, it's really, yeah. I don't design a lot of sweaters because of the time consuming piece of it. I mean, I've done, I don't know, quite a few, but it's not my niche. Like I don't just do those only. But when I do them, boy, they better fit well. They better, they they better be a good looking fit cardigan without a lot of fancy schmancy gymnastics going on. Yeah, for sure.
The things that I love to knit, I mean, I am a designer for hire. If you come to me and you say, I'm going to pay you $800 and I want you to do a top down seamless seam, I'm fine, no problem. But the things that I really get into are the clothes that I want to wear, which are fairly simple, usually stockinette stitch or a little bit of texture, but I've done heavily cabled sweaters
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I don't wear them because
yeah,
it's too much texture for me.
yeah,
I love to do color work, love to do stripes,
yeah,
but it's simple, wearable silhouettes that are going to get worn a lot.
yeah. People will ask what we're wearing, and I know that you said yours doesn't have a pattern,
No,
um,
for
but
me, the
it's just
luxury is to be able to knit a sweater just because it's the sweater I want to wear and not have to worry about grading it for 9 sizes and how
right.
am I going to write this pattern?
But someone could find striped cardigan
Sure.
out on Ravelry and kind of look at your striping pattern and make them. This is the Stopover sweater, which was a knit a sweater in a month for February of 2020
The bang out of sweater,
something. What?
the Mason Dixon knitting or
Yeah.
modern daily knitting bang out of sweater. Yeah.
Yeah, bang out a sweater in a month. That was this one. So it's Icelandic yarn, and it was knit on a giant needle with fine yarn, and it was kind of a oversized sloppy thing, and I did it on a normal needle size in a smaller gauge and made a different size so that I got more of a fitted sweater. And then it has just the little bit of color at the sleeves and the bottom, but it doesn't look, I mean, it's got the yoke that looks the same, but my sweater doesn't fit like that sweater that people could get done in a month because it was knit on a giant needle and it was open and airy and
You made the sweater that you want to wear.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the things about going to events like Makers Festival or Stitches or Vogue Knitting Live is you see a lot of really poorly fitting sweaters walk past you because people don't take responsibility for adjusting the pattern to fit their body. And as a tech editor, I am really aware that it is impossible for me as a designer or me as an editor to grade a pattern that's going to fit everybody.
Exactly.
We have to make assumptions and we have to go by averages, and we don't know you.
Right. Exactly. And I'm so short. I'm so short. I'm like maybe 5'3", and there's no way I can knit the length of these sweaters on the bust size that I need to wear because they're going to be longer. And I do want the fabric to go over the girls, but I cannot possibly knit them. And most people understand that concept, right? Of you don't want it to hang at your knees, so you got to make it as long as you want it. But they don't do the same thing with their circumference or their armhole depth or their sleeves. So you get their sleeves are too tight or their wrist is too big. They don't like, all those things that can also just be amended. But that is a learning thing. You do have to have, I hate to say it, a couple of sweaters that don't work well until you kind of get that. It's kind of like they say for socks too, like the first pair you make might not fit, right? It's a bummer that you have to make a whole pair and then be like, oh, I want the heel like this and the toe like this. And I don't really know how I want it till I get the first sock done and kind of figure out, oh, it's a half an inch too short and my toes feel like, like some of that has to just come with trial and error.
Well, we need to be more gentle with ourselves about that trial and error. There's an expectation I think we have as competent adults is that if we undertake to do this, it's going to come out right. And we have to allow ourselves the grace of what we don't know and learning by experience and learning from our mistakes. But then we also have to commit to learning and not just say, well, that didn't work and burying it behind the couch and then going on and making the same mistakes all over again. No, 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 no. Identify why it didn't work and learn what you can do to make the next one better.
Yeah. A lot of adult women are the worst new learners. We have not had to learn new things for a long time, right? Yes. Children are just, well, I have to learn. I'm learning everything. And so they, young ones, middle age, like I taught high school, and they're still learning things all the time. But as we get older and older and older, we're not learning as much. We have this sense that we kind of know, we can figure out, and they get so frustrated so quickly. And I'm like, well, you've been at this for 5 minutes, so you should be a pro. Well, my stitches are so loose. Well, you've done 6. They can be so hard on themselves in that moment. And I don't teach a lot of men how to knit. It just hasn't happened. So I'm generalizing with the whole women because it's almost always a group of beginning knitter women. And I have to have that conversation at the beginning. Like, you will not get this in the first 6 minutes of this class. It's going to take give yourself some grace here, exactly what you said, to just be in the moment. And I'm learning something new. And the stitches, I said, we're making a swatch. We're not going to frame this. You're not going to take this home and frame it like your kids' art from elementary school. So it's going to have holes and loosey-goosey stitches, and the edges might grow and be wonky. And then we're going to rip it out. You know, like, it's fine. It's just a practice piece. But boy, they want those stitches to be, you know, perfect right away. And they want everything to fit immediately in the moment. Yes. Like, they want it to fit perfectly, but they don't always do the work to figure that out, right? Like making a gauge swatch and washing the gauge swatch and you know, figuring how much it's going to grow. And I don't know, we skip those steps and then we're frustrated on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, we become impatient and we just are so uncomfortable with incompetence. And yet there is such freedom when you decide, oh, I don't know how to do this. I'm a beginner. It's not going to turn out well, but I'm going to have fun with it anyway.
Exactly.
So
I
much
agree.
happier place to be.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything that I missed? Because I kind of made a list, but I want to definitely talk about your blog and your work life and all the things that you're cobbling together to do, and then your patterns.
I think that's it. I just would want to say thank you very much. This has been so much fun. And for anyone who wants to check out my newsletter, it's every week. There's a yarn review coming out tomorrow.
Okay.
And it's Sandi with an I, Rosner, all smooshed together, .substack.com. And it's a free, you subscribe, it lands in your email inbox every week.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on, is to help you grow your audience a little bit, because I have some really loyal watchers, and they will go over and they'll look at your patterns too. They'll go over to Ravelry and look at your patterns. And I assume you're under Sandi Rosner over there.
I am.
Yep. Excellent. I'll have that all down below here. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks Sandi for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right.